Alright. I think it's happening. I think it is happening. In fact, even my cat is here and ready to join us for the occasion. Oh geez, he's helping me change channels. That wasn't quite planned. Anyway, hey, welcome back to the stream, folks. This is the frequent work-in-progress electronics and cat show. And we're back to our, oh, don't sniff glue, Tuco. We're back to our work in progress on this flying camera for hanging out with Tuco. And unlike this camera right here, which I'm having to precariously hold, this camera precariously holds itself. Oh, yeah. Pardon the LEDs. The flashing there is not actually intentional. It's supposed to be this sort of soft rotating pattern, but one of the bugs right now is a signal integrity issue on the LED bus. But anyway, there's still a laundry list of bugs with this thing, but this morning I put it up on the winches for the first time, so we can actually start to use it for its intended purpose. It flies. Yeah, so let's see if we can switch over to that camera and get a view of that whole situation. It did seem like Tuco wanted to play, and of course, where did I leave the remote? The remote is way over there. I did start out the stream with the wireless microphone since I figured that would be helpful. Oh yeah. And of course Tuco's following me because he just wants to play. And now the camera's picked him up already. Let's just head back over there. And in fact, I thought I would give you fine folks the debug view. Do I have that mapped to anything? Yeah. This view maybe? Oh, what would be really rad is this and the overhead camera. Even though the overhead camera's laggy, can we do that? Not that camera. This camera, but with less of it being off screen. Yeah, how's that? So what I'm also going to do is, since this is actually starting to get a bit interesting on the Tuco Flyer end, I'm going to start up the secondary stream. So this is something I'm going to be doing more often when the robot's actually working normally, but I'm going to start it streaming, and this one will not have sound, and I don't think I'll really be paying that much attention to the chat, although I probably should have it up somewhere, just, you know. Anyway, you should be able to go now to twitch.tv/TucoFlyer, and that'll go directly to the Tuco Flyer feed that you're seeing in the window there. And so yeah, let me know how that goes. I'm gonna see if I can get that up on my phone. And so far we haven't moved the camera, it's just been sitting there. So that's pretty much like before. I don't know if I can manage this from my phone, because I think my phone is logged in as scanlime. And I'm streaming there, too. Anyway, give me a shout in the chat if it's, like, working or not working, and I'm gonna maybe go upstairs and grab my tablet in a sec to monitor that, but for now, I want to show you this thing moving around a little. So, let's see, Tuco's again in kind of an awkward location. Hey Tuke, you want to come over here, or do you want me to try to fly the camera over there? All of the above? Alright, let's see what we can do. So, as you can see, it gets a little wobbly. I think there are actually a handful of reasons for that. You know, some of the wobbliness is just the intrinsic instability of the mechanical system, so there are a lot of places where it can gain additional vibrational modes, which is unfortunate. I don't think that's that big of a problem, though, as long as I mitigate it properly in software. So some of that is going to be keeping the acceleration limit pretty low. And I think I have the acceleration limit set somewhat low, but I think I could probably still go lower. And we'll try adjusting those settings in just a sec. Right now, it still isn't really adjusted that much. So that's something to try. Oh, is Tuco wandering into the blind spot? The other thing I keep running into is that there's the gimbal does not rotate around 360 degrees. So you can actually see the little mini map if I'm pointing to it right there. That little X is the location of the camera, and then this box represents the whole space that the gimbal can move in, where the X-axis is yaw and the Y-axis is pitch. And so you can see we're like in the very corner of the gimbal space right now. So it would be nice if the gimbal was completely 360 degree rotation, or no, you know, continuous rotation, not 360 degree. Right now it's like not a full 360 degree, but it's also not continuous. I have to like manually aim it down there. So it's like near the edge of where the gimbal can track. So I think what we would want to do in this case is move the physical robot in order to get it better positioned. And this is going to be an interesting problem. Right now, in fact, the whole robot is a little bit lower. Well, actually, I was going to say it's lower than I would want it to be, but it's actually, the robot's actually positioned fairly realistically right now. The saucer section of the flyer is above all the furniture in the room, which is what I'd want. I'd plan on having an adjustable sort of virtual floor so that it wouldn't automatically fly below where the saucer section is at least not going to hit anything, and the cables above it aren't going to hit anything. And then it would use its onboard sensors in order to not hit anything with all the stuff that hangs below that saucer section. So that's pretty good right now. So I think if I were the algorithm, which I'm going to try to pretend to be, I would probably want to kind of swing over kind of toward the camera's right side, or toward the lower left corner of the room. So kind of toward that direction. And I'm going to come up on my desk here, which I'm going to have to avoid hitting. And then I'm also going to start having trouble with actually going in that direction because the forces are getting weird for multiple reasons. One of which is just that as I start to get closer to that side of the room where the pulleys are mounted much higher, the force vectors start to deviate from my bad approximation. So that's one problem. But the other problem is specific to something else we need to work on in this stream, which is my leash attachment is pulling on the flyer too much right now. Which isn't to say that it's like too much for the motors to handle or whatever, but where the problem actually comes into play is that the force from the leash actually takes over from the kind of far side winches too much, so that I actually can't get as far into this corner as I want to, because like if I... It's maybe hard to articulate the geometry. Well, you can see the overhead view, so I should just use those coordinates. So in the overhead view, I'm trying to go down and left. And the problem I'm running into is that the winch in the top left of the screen can't unwind enough because it's hitting its low tension limit. And similar would go to the top right winch, but just the two top winches can't unwind enough because where they would want to actually be pulling the flyer in that direction, actually the heavy leash is doing a lot of that pulling. So there are a bunch of solutions to that, including making the leash lighter, making the flyer heavier, changing the way the leash counterweight system works. The first thing I want to do actually is just having less leash, because I think right now it's just a little bit too long, and so the length and the weight are a problem. And then I can adjust the weight on the counterweight. I think I want to decrease the counterweight and decrease the length, but still keep iterating on this particular leash concept until I come up with something better. I know you can't really see. Let me try to get in a better view. So I can't really get to any further down than my desk right there, or toward down on your overhead view. But if I go Z minus, like physically down, then I think I can go get a little closer to us. But yeah, it is actually quite hard to drive this thing now with the weight of the leash. Whoa, let's not bang the gimbal into anything. Yeah, okay, we totally lost. Sorry about that. So yeah, I'm having a little trouble getting it into a good position just because of the leash right now, and we'll take a iteration at fixing that in a sec. But if I keep it in around this position or so, we should be stable. Hey, Tuco. Tuco is just hanging out on this rug, sitting next to this bolt. I'm sure you folks have questions in chat, so I'm going to go grab my tablet and try to join in on that. Is Tuco going to come up here? Hi. Welcome to the carpet. I'm saying that as if I just physically brought all of you down here. Oh, cool. Glad to see that the Twitch stream is good. Oh, Tuco. Oh, see, let's see if I can actually use this to get that cat scratcher out of the way. Oh, yeah, see how effortless that was? I don't know how audible the winches are. They sound a little bit weird right now because there's still some oscillation as they come to a stop. I haven't debugged all the reasons behind that. I suspect there might be multiple reasons. I think part of it is that there's a dead zone around the position error term for the PID loop on the winches, and I think that dead zone could use some hysteresis because we're oscillating in and out of it. There's maybe one or two other places I could put some hysteresis to try to help with that, but it hasn't been like the very top thing on my to-do list. It's like maybe number 3 or 4 at the moment, but it's close. And yeah, they sound a little bit weird because they're doing this thing to try to overcome the friction in starting, where they start at a really low PWM frequency. Did we lose Tuco? Where is Tuco? Why can't I steer left? This is weird. I think Tuco is just too far down on the screen. I'm going to try just running the robot over here. Actually, the place I was originally thinking, oh, I'll just put the robot there, is both hard to get to because of the leash problem currently, and because of the blind spot in the gimbal. Gosh, I really can't get further than about halfway through the room, like because of the leash weight right now. It's just way too heavy. I mean, the combination of the leash and the counterweight. So yeah, that needs work. Can I steer down? Am I stuck showing you folks me? I mean, if I steer way over here, I can get a different camera angle. That worked. Oh, that actually worked quite well. That's at a pretty realistic height, too. What is the lowest I could get it to automatically drive? So I'm going to try to drive the... Whoa, sorry. I think another problem this has... So there are multiple reasons why it's oscillating at the slow end, like after I'm finished moving it. Some of it is the unslack loop trying to balance the forces, or trying to keep the cables from becoming too slack, which it wouldn't have to do quite so hard if the motion algorithm was better at calculating good motion vectors, but it's terrible at that right now, so it ends up messing up the slack on the cords pretty frequently, which means oscillating in and out of the unslack loop. So that's one thing that's happening. Another thing that was happening, which is kind of ridiculous, is just that the joystick here doesn't perfectly zero all the time, so sometimes I'll be like adjusting the z-axis, and in the meantime the XY plane will be just like slowly drifting in one direction because the joystick doesn't perfectly zero. Can we go a little bit up, actually? I think we're a little too low. And so where was that oscillation coming from? I think some of that was coming from stopping too abruptly. Some of that might have been just like weird kind of vibration modes in the leash, which might be a little bit better once we simplify that, but... So anyway, one thing that I want to do soon is, so I don't know, some of you might have been noticing the kind of minor detour in this project recently to go into collecting data. So there's a lot of data, obviously. There's sensors in all of the winches and in the moving platform. There's sensors in the gimbal. There's the commands and the modes and everything else. And the robot software itself, the data has just kind of been this fast, high throughput fire hose of real-time data that goes in and out quickly but never gets saved. And so for analyzing stuff like this, I've been wanting a way to actually... where is Tuco? I think he's behind that coffee table from your perspective. Oh no, there he is. Yeah, so for doing more like data analysis after the fact, I looked at a bunch of options, and I've been using InfluxDB, which is an open source database for storing time series data. So stuff like sensor data or like server activity or network throughput, stuff like that. Kind of the spiritual successor to stuff like RRD tool if you've used that. Let me see if I can get you a better angle. This is tricky because there's actually a great spot to put the camera right now, but it's hard to reach with the leash problem because I just don't have a lot of mobility right now. So yeah, we have this InfluxDB data logging now. It's not at the full data rate that the internal message bus uses, but it's at a configurable kind of downsampled rate. So I've got it logging at like 100 hertz right now, which is still probably fast enough to analyze motion. And now we've got the actual robot with an accelerometer and a gyroscope and all sorts of sensor fusion and stuff going on. So we can actually now move the winches and correlate that with all of the gyroscope and accelerometer readings and use that to debug any oscillations or weird motion that we're getting. So I'm pretty happy about that. We should actually be able to get this thing dialed in much nicer. And even though it does oscillate due to those kind of unintended impulses in the motion subsystem, the 4-chord system, the way it balances from 4 points and has some elasticity in each of the cables, it does seem to be doing a pretty good job of like damping out the oscillations nicely. So like right now, I'm just like looking at the robot, and the leash is wobbling a little bit back and forth. It's like swaying, I guess, is the word I would use. But the 4 suspension cables are all nice and tense, and I don't see any visible vibration in the winch, or in the flier, rather. So it stays pretty stable. And if I were able to move this to a physically better location, like, man, like right behind my desk would be a great spot to capture this action right now. Can I drive it over there if I am more deliberate about it, I wonder? Let's try to go Z plus first. The counterweight, the string for the counterweight is a little bit long. I've got to be careful not to hit anything with on my desk with the counterweight as I move around. Oh, yeah, like, that's about to hit a light stand on my desk. Oh, yeah. I'm just hitting this invisible wall over here as I... Oh, geez. Oh, it's started swinging pretty badly, and the gimbal was alarmingly close to the concrete wall right there. Yeah, that's not really working. There's kind of an invisible wall kind of diagonally there because of the forces being put on the flier by the leash. And Well, I mean, obviously it's not just the forces, it's the combination of the actual forces and the control loop that tries to keep the winches from becoming more than a particular amount of slack. So yeah, gotta fix that before I can really address the whole room again. We were driving around with the same winch control system and all that, but just, using like a dummy spool of wire instead of this thing. And I mean, that has a few dynamic differences. The spool of wire didn't have the like mass swinging at the end of a long stick that this has. And I was also, for the spool of wire, I was attaching all of the cords to a single point, whereas here they're all attached along the perimeter of the saucer. But other than that, yeah, the main dynamic difference here is the leash. I was trying to even just lower this down here, but there's another sort of invisible wall, kind of right along there. And we keep, Tuco is again like right by where the gimbal end stops are. So if I spin all the way around, I think I can see him. Yeah, I could also change how the flier is hung to move where that kind of blind spot is. Right now it's kind of pointing toward the like kitchen area here. Maybe it would make more sense to point it toward like the right side of the shop. Winch 0 is overly slack right now. Oh no, and that's like, the cord for winch 0 is just getting stuck on a box. You can kind of recover the situation when one winch gets overly slack, because it'll refuse to move that winch, but you can use the other winches to pick up the slack, and once you've picked it up enough, then it'll go back to moving that original winch again. Oh, I just set it down on the couch. That's great. That's not quite what I was going for. Oh, did I just pick up winch 0? I think I did. That's not quite how I intended to do it, but I did it. Sorry, I'm not paying attention to the chat. Oh yeah, a couple people are asking if Tuco has any interest in the flier, or what would happen if Tuco jumped on it. If Tuco jumped on it, then it would either just immediately break, or it would start unrolling, because he's definitely heavier than the tension limits that are set in software right now. And he hasn't really shown any interest in it, surprisingly enough. I thought he might at least like paw at it a bit, but he's been pretty much ignoring it. He's a little bit curious about it sometimes, and like he looks at it sometimes, but he mostly ignores it. Yeah, Paul says the 80s synth vuvuzela sounds are kind of nice. Yeah, that's a good description. Cool. Well, thanks for the kind words, folks. It is neat to actually see this going. I should get the DSLR up on the leash so I can kind of show what's going on with that too. Guys, I think it's kind of working, but it definitely needs some adjustment. Whoa, hair cam. All right. Oh, yeah. All right, so, wow, that's a weird vertigo-inducing angle. Okay. So, what is that first thing you're seeing? This cord in the foreground, that one, that is the load-bearing cord for winch 0. And then the rest of this mess you're seeing is the leash and its suspension system. So then the thick bundle is the actual wire for the leash, and then you have these kind of clamp doodads that hold it every so often. I think those are like 1.2 meters apart or something along those lines. And then there's actually some monofilament line that is knotted after the last one, but then it just passes straight through the others. So the idea is it kind of gathers up the cord in bundles as the flier moves around, and the very last segment of it is kind of extra long so that the bundle of cable hangs somewhat far from the flier itself. So I can demonstrate that a little bit, I think. Oh yeah, here I'm going to be hitting my desk with the counterweight, sorry. So yeah, pretend that counterweight wasn't running out of space. It's the cord needs to be shorter, but a lot of things need to change anyway. So, whoa, let's just hit my monitors with the counterweight. So, like, I think the basic idea is working. It's just way too long. I mean, it's kind of hard to see the full extension because you need to run the winch to the other side of the room. And the problem with that is, like, you can't actually get it that far because the cords on the same side as the leash are no longer supporting enough of the load. The computer vision thinks something is a knife. Oh, that's a carabiner. And then we're having some other oscillation problems at low speed. And I was saying, I think there are actually several reasons for those. One of those reasons I think is still friction. I think we still need some tuning for avoiding friction because it just sticks and then unsticks repeatedly. Yeah, I'm trying to lower it, and Z minus is actually a really difficult direction to go in, and I basically end up doing X minus a whole bunch also, because that's the direction the leash is pulling in. Let me try to parse the comments that are coming in. Sorry about that. Actually, I think let me try to parse the comments that are coming in over making a cup of tea, since I think I'm going to run out of moisture in my mouth otherwise. How's everyone's Friday, if that's the day that it is when you're hearing this? If not, what do you feel about other days? Days ending with various letters. So that cat says, from looking at the overhead cam, it kind of looks like the front left winch loses tension quite often, while the front right one doesn't. Yeah, I think that's just the same thing I was saying earlier, but stated a little differently. It's not just the front left; it's really the whole left side, because that's where the leash is kind of pulling toward. Fabio suggests a dynamic counterweight using something. Oh, using a fifth winch instead of a sandbag. Yeah, that would certainly be a thing that I could do. I've just been trying to find a passive solution before I add a bunch of extra complexity to the project. But yes, one solution to this might be an additional winch for sure. And it could be a simpler winch than these four, but you know, that's a solution. I think there's probably a simpler option. Yeah, Matt says Friday I spend most of the day thinking about all the stuff I want to do on Saturday. Yeah. Well, okay. In that case, I think we've done about as much as I care to with the system in its current configuration. I think what this means is park the bot somewhere fairly safe and out of the way, and then lower the leash support. And I think I decided earlier that I wanted to take about 2 of these sections out. So what that would mean is like taking off 2 of the clamps, moving the top clamp down by 2 of these, basically to where that additional one is. I'm going to leave the rubber or the Ninja Flex grommets on the cable because those are hard to get off. You have to slide them down the entire length of the cable. But the clamps come off in 2 pieces, so they're really easy to mess with. I guess I also want to actually slide the clamps off the end of the monofilament, which is fine. That'll all be easy to do when I get the pulley down from the ceiling, which I can lower. Nemo says one can make the flier like an upside-down Steadicam, add a pole protruding from the top that adds rotational inertia and lifts the center of gravity to right below the area where the whole thing pivots. Yeah. I think what you're saying is just basically adding a counterweight to the top of the flier. That wouldn't be a bad idea. I don't really have any way to mount such a thing right now, but I could probably redesign just that top plate on the flier and put in something like that. It's not really clear to me that that's necessary, though. Alright, so some upness. I'm just going to try to park this as kind of as far right as I can get it. Actually, I'm going to raise it. Whoa. It's kind of scary being that far up, isn't it? What is the view like from up there? I can see my whiteboard. Oh, this would be a great place to see Tuco on the rack from. Can you see us over here? Oh, we were just barely... I'm just barely off the edge. Tuco is standing by my feet, so he's kind of off the edge right now. I'm trying... So Z minus kind of just puts us along that plane that cuts across the room. I should be able to get a little more Z minus if I move toward this winch, right? A little bit. I'm still very inconveniently... Maybe I should put the blind spot for the winch toward the X plus direction instead of the Y plus direction. my ideal position for this would really just be really either in the corner to the left or right of where I'm standing. So either in like x minus y plus or x plus y plus, like either of those corners would be a great place for the camera, and wouldn't be a problem with the blind spot. I just can't really put them in either of those places right now because the leash is pulling on me too much. So anyway, this spot seems like an okay place for the camera to hang out temporarily while I'm working on it. It won't hit anything if it moves around too much. Maybe I'll raise it a little more. But it shouldn't just like hit stuff. I also can't really see much though from this location. Can you watch me take the leash off the ceiling from here? Oh, you can see the streaming monitor. Oh, did we lose the overhead camera? I was actually only looking at the flier camera from where I could stand. I couldn't see this one, sorry. Let's just switch back to this view. Not that view. That view? That's pretty meta. Person. Do we have, oh yeah, look, person. So many persons. We do have a phantom bicycle again. The camera could totally be a bicycle. Yeah, it is kind of like a fractal, isn't it? Can I get a good view of this next process? So I can't aim this very far up right now. Maybe you can just watch me fuss with ropes. I should drink some of that tea though. It's not helping when I don't drink it. The ropes are good to fuss with. So, yeah, there's a lot of messy cable up there. Let's lower most of that. Using two lines for this is not really necessary. I'm mostly just doing it because I don't trust these ceiling clamps very much. And so for a dynamic load, I would like to have it rigged so that if one of those clamps fail, nothing falls all the way to the ground. And that's what this is for. Oh, the counterweight is sitting on top of my light. That's fine, it's only 1 kilogram. Putting this up was kind of, like I put the leash up before putting the flyer up, so it's never been in this state before where the flyer hanging and then the leash just kind of like dangling below the flyer. So I should actually be able to move the flyer around much better now, but it's just going to be trailing this thick cord that disrupts whatever it hits. Oh, temporarily. All right. Yeah, that's the counterweight. It is a sandbag, which is nice because it's adjustable. Can we go any more up? Oh yeah, so that's the actual thing. So we made this a bunch of streams ago. This is a 3D printed piece, which is just kind of like a guide for the wire. I didn't originally design this with the counterweight system in mind, so it didn't really include any spot for this pulley. So this is not really optimal how it's just kind of rubbing next to the wire right now. But I think given how little it moves and how smooth everything is, it's not really that much of a concern. But it is a suboptimal and something to fix at some point. So it's just one of the same pulleys we used in the corner, but kind of stacked on top of this other design. Wow, it's a stop sign. So, stop sign and a toothbrush, or frisbee? Cool. I'm glad to know we have a stop sign, a frisbee, and a toothbrush available here. Oh, and there's the leash. That's the other reason not to let the leash hang, because it definitely obscures the vision. Okay. That's cool. It's definitely on the to-do list now that I want this overlay that you're seeing right now to have some feedback for the winch data as well. So you can see the gimbal right there. So that's the gimbal position. And I'd love to have some graphs elsewhere on the screen that show you, like, imagine some like little tiny strip charts or spark lines or whatever the kids are calling them these days that show the force on the gimbals and the PWM drive to all the gimbals. That could be fun. Then again, like, it's probably, at least until I really nail down the low acceleration movement, it'll be somewhat obvious when it moves. Like that. It is tempting to fly it around with the leash dangling like that, but I'm sure it's going to make some kind of mess. You know, actually, I'm realizing I need to lower this a little bit more. I'm going to put the counterweight on the ground, and then I just need to get this low enough that I can actually get a wrench up into that purple piece, because I actually do have to take the purple piece apart. Whoa. So I pushed the shoulder. So these controllers, I've got it set up to have like kind of a dead man switch, so that if you aren't holding down one of the bumpers, it won't do anything with the robot. And it uses that same bumper for both the gimbal and the winches. So I was holding the bumper to move the gimbal, and that also started it moving the winches because the analog stick wasn't zeroed. So I should maybe add my own dead zone. I had been trusting the joystick driver to have enough of a dead zone, but I don't think it's quite enough. So yeah, let's lower this thing down a little more. Oh, I've also got to make sure to put away these wrenches before I lose them. Tuco is over here just avoiding all of this action. Oh no, I'm starting to have a coordinate system for the shop now. It's all just based on, well, I got to put something in the config file for these winches. I'll just make up some vectors, and before I know it, now my shop has axes. I guess I didn't just make up the coordinate system for the winches. I copied it from the overhead camera. So really, I guess my shop had a coordinate system the first time I put a camera mount up on the railing, which wasn't even the current camera. I used to have a GoPro up there for time lapses. Yeah. And then of course I could have labeled the axes all sorts of ways, but I had to choose like an image coordinate system way of doing it. Okay, I'm going to very gently leave these ropes clipped over here. There's like almost no tension on those ropes. This is one of those situations where if those ropes got jostled out of the groove in their pulley, then it would be very, very difficult for me to fix them. They're like way up there, and yeah, it would involve some seriously being high up. I didn't actually put those up. I had a friend put them up who was at the time like really interested in like climbing on the roof truss. I was like, we could do this with a ladder, and she was like, nope, and just climbed over there. It's a slippery slope, says Kate. First you let an engineer into your house, and then suddenly there's axes showing up all over the place. I know, right? And then they'll want like units for all your measurements. And of course, that same wrench I just put away is the one that I would use to open this. I think I'm going to use this screwdriver instead, though. Oh, geez, this has like 1,000,000 bolts holding it together. Why? Interesting. Matt has a suggestion for stabilizing the bot using a bit of shock cord to the bottom of the pole part of the platform. Yeah, that's an interesting idea. I'll have to think about it. The first thing that comes to mind is that would make collision avoidance much harder. Because now we've just like changed and somewhat made dynamic the whole footprint of the robot, whereas right now, below the level of the saucer, it tries to be the same, like, pretty unobtrusive cylinder. This is a terrible view, I know. I do have some really small diameter bungee cord that we could try for stuff like that, though. I thought I would end up using a combination of bungee cord and something else for this leash suspension, but I ended up just using a counterweight. I'll just take out these 1,000,000 screws while you all watch, I guess. And this is supposed to be the cat camera, but the cat's like way on the other end of the shop. I'm sorry, I really need 2 of these now. I do still have a tripod with the camera on it, which was the original Tuco cam. I guess I could jam it into some otherwise unused video input. I don't have like spare video inputs though. I'd have to temporarily use the one for like the DSLR or something, and then the software would make it annoying to change modes all the time. Sweet and sour spots. Keith was wondering about adding gyroscopes, like the spinning kind for stabilization. I don't know. Huh. That's an interesting idea. I mean, gyroscopes don't like null out the forces, they just you end up kind of changing the direction, right? I mean, it would be complexity and weight and power and all that, but like, yeah, I'm kind of curious. I don't think you can just add gyroscopes. I think what you're talking about is like a reaction wheel stabilization system, which is like an active thing usually. Yeah, exactly. Tino says no inputs. That's why I need those C90 boxes. You're absolutely right. It's right there on the yak stack. yeah, no, that's totally. So if you haven't seen, one of the other projects that we've been poking at is there's this really high-end video conferencing codec box that a kind viewer donated a while ago, and we've been kind of tearing into it. And there's actually 2 of those here now, both thanks to Umar. And one of them is kind of rooted and pretty easy to tinker around with, and the other is not. And so the non-rooted one, actually, we might even be able to use some fairly off-the-shelf software to control it as a kind of video compositor or multiplexer thing. So there's that, and then we could use the kind of lower level access to do that and much more, I'm sure. Ah! Oh no. Mako MK thinks that we're dealing with some dead yaks here. We're not tending our yak garden. Oh, sorry, I'm a little behind on the chat from YouTube and Twitch here. I don't know why I'm hearing about a raid party on Twitch, but that's cool, I guess. What game? And then on YouTube chat, let's see. Oh yeah, Joel was wondering how I'm picking up the slack on the camera. Oh, okay, you're asking about the leash, because I guess I saw that question going in 2 ways, because there's like some software that picks up the slack on the winches, and then there's a counterweight that picks up the slack on the physical wire here. Oh yeah, and then Son of the Cakes was asking about a ground proximity sensor, and that's actually one of the next things to do, is to get this thing sensing height. So yes, that's very close to being a thing that we're actually doing. I keep meaning to show you what this looks like in the mirror. Didn't I have a little mirror around here? I always think it's cool to show camera robots, you know, what a mirror looks like. That's how you get the AIs interested in breaking free, right? Maybe I put it away. I guess I could show it a tablet in selfie mode that's like a mirror, right? I did actually have a piece of glass, like physical mirror here, though. Can you focus? The iPad's focused, but that camera is set to a fixed focus that's a little bit further. But yeah, that's what you look like. I keep leaving my tea over here. Yeah, Kate's warning us that with the selfie cam, newspaper editors are going to start calling it a millennial, right? It's like, oh no, they just want to eat toast and talk about how they can't afford anything. Must be a millennial. I'm all about toast. I think I'm technically maybe a little old for being a millennial by a lot of people's definition, but I definitely feel like that's my generation. guess I don't know how obvious age is, but I'm like in my early 30s. Are millennial robots killing all humans? Right. Okay, so I've got this thing open. It just comes apart like that, and this is still supported by the paracords running through it, but I can move it freely-ish now. And I guess I need to take off 2 of these clamps also, but I can go ahead and start pushing this through. Oh, Took. I've been trying to make sure he stays away from this paracord. Or actually not the paracord. The paracord he's kind of interested in, but the monofilament is what I really want to keep him away from. Right? Yeah, that's a good point about the HRT, Kate. Oh, Tuco. Let me try to go back to catching up on Twitch chat. Yeah, this is a cat stalking channel, basically. Joel asks if I've got the computer vision code for OBS on GitHub. Yeah, all the code is on GitHub. It's if you go to the Tuco Flier organization, then you'll find all the different repos. The main software is called Bot Controller, but the OBS Tuco Flier plugin is where all the computer vision and overlay stuff lives. And yeah, I mean, the detection, if you're just interested in object detection, just look at YOLO. People have ported YOLO to a bunch of different libraries. The thing you're seeing here isn't just YOLO, but it's a combination of things. But the thing that's like labeling the boxes with what you're seeing here, that's just a pre-trained YOLO model. You can get from like 0 to that point without a whole lot of work or a whole lot of understanding of computer vision. One thing that's on the to-do list for the future is to train our own model with kind of more objects that are relevant to this particular environment, but right now I'm using a pre-trained model file. Oh, right, I think I do just need to take the monofilament out of this whole assembly right now, because I do need to pull it through these brackets. How do I do that? I think I just cut it at this end. Oh man, I'm so paranoid about this stuff because like I'm sure Tuco would just swallow it and it would be like really bad for him. So anytime I work with this stuff, I've got to like be careful to throw away all the scraps. Tuco's like, I saw that. I'm like, I know. You're not getting it. Can I move the bot a little further this way? I mean, I know I can now that I'm not hampered by the counterweight. Yeah, that's much nicer. A little wobbly, and of course the leash is in the way now. I was kind of propping it up over here on this shelf, which is keeping it kind of out of the way. Mako MK says, plus if you train your own model, you can add shop-relevant categories like Wacom tablet, right? Yeah, things that there are way too many of in this shop include Wacom tablets and speakers and circuit boards. This, of course, is one of the many, many 3D printable designs where I really should have used square nuts, and instead I used hex nuts, and they just want to break free from their surroundings at any opportunity. I remember loving square nuts when I was a kid, and I put together erector set models. Well, when I say it that way, it's like I say it like as if I was trying to build a thing in particular. I would like buy erector set kits and then just like use them to make my own stuff. I treated them as like a playground, and it was nice. Never quite got to the point of actually making a robot out of erector set. Like, I made a thing that would have been kind of robot-y, but I didn't have any of the parts to make it actually... Like, I had a motor, but it didn't have, like, batteries or any kind of control system or anything. That was about as far as I got. I just took off one clamp, take off a second clamp. I've got to start organizing my spare parts for this project, because I've got just random spots around the shop where it's like, oh yeah, here's a stash of spare Tuco Flyer pulleys, and here's a bunch of spare clamps for Tuco Flyer. Kate says they're pretty sure my shop is mostly cameras by now. Yeah. Yeah, actually I was still thinking about adding new cameras. I think the next camera I want to try to add to the stream, well, I keep toying with the idea of upgrading the DSLR to like an actual 4K video camera, but I'm not quite sure I'm ready to take that plunge yet. I might be getting there, but that'll be more for the benefit of the edited content than the streams, really. The benefit to the streams will be that I'll get something with clean HDMI out, but the benefit to the edited videos will be higher resolution. So that might be a good thing to do. As far as the next like new camera for the streams, though, it would be cool to have a pan tilt zoom overhead cam made from one of these Tandberg cameras that we got from Umar. So mount one of those up there, put it on a long SDI cable probably, and then, oh, I was about to actually put this too far up. I think this might be the right distance. So yeah, long SDI cable, long serial control cable of some sort. I think this is the right distance. Let's try putting it back together with these settings. Oh man, I was about to clamp this onto the monofilament. It's not for that. Let's not do that. Ha ha ha, right? That'll have to be a reverse engineering stream once there's a new camera, hack a servo AF overlay back in, right? I'd be okay with having the servo AF be part of the OBS setup instead of the camera, but yeah. Yeah, that's definitely an artifact of the particular camera I'm using. Ah, sorry, I keep hitting the mic with my hand. I could try to aim this up at what I'm doing, but the cat's down there. It'll find him. Oh. And of course, here I am trying to position the gimbal, and the winches start moving because the joystick wasn't quite zeroed. It's funny, like the Xbox 360 joystick makes it much easier to move in more than two axes at once. So like doing X, Y, and Z at the same time, I can really only do that with this kind of controller. But getting smooth one or two dimensional motion is actually way easier on the mobile web browser front end for this. I've got just like a little thing you can drag with your thumb, and it's very accurate. You don't need a dead zone. It can tell exactly when you put your thumb down and let it go. I just slightly misaligned this. I'm going to take this apart and put it back together. Oh no. Kate was glad that they didn't end up with the exact same DSLR overlay. I don't think that would have been a problem. It would have been kind of funny if it was that common, but I think it's just like kind of funny and weird how much that overlay has become iconic in this particular place. But yeah. I've got to do laundry so I can wear my Servo AF t-shirt. I'm actually terrible at laundry. You might have noticed that I wear boring t-shirts a lot. I had a pretty recent period of my life where I was doing more like exciting clothing, but then I kind of reverted back to being boring for a while. This robot is also doing a pretty decent job of keeping the shop warm. I can turn off the gas heater. I think we're through with enough of winter that I can just rely on the rack. It's only a few hundred watts. Well, 500. I don't know. I'll have to see what the UPS says I'm drawing. I'm sure a lot of it is going into the computer vision right now. Could probably actually increase the overall power efficiency quite a bit if I moved to GPU-based region tracking algorithm. Because that's all running on the CPU right now for no reason other than that's where I had the code. Like I just found a library to do it, and the library didn't have CUDA support or whatever. Oh, Kate was noticing the surface that's duct taped to the music stand. Yes, that is what's going on. It's been pretty much my full-time stream chat machine, basically. It's like a slightly slow Microsoft Surface that Kate gave me a while ago. Oh, it looks like I'm a little behind on the chat again, sorry. Oh, Son of the Cakes was asking what Tuco's thoughts are on privacy. Yeah, that's a good question, actually. I mean, I've been kind of looking for signs like, well, what is Tuco's opinion on any of this? And obviously he doesn't understand the internet streaming angle, but as far as I can tell, he doesn't really seem to mind about this object hanging out with him. And, you know, if there is like this baseline of him being okay with this thing in his space, then maybe we can use that to kind of build on it and maybe deliver him a positive experience of hanging out with somebody weird on the internet, perhaps. That's got to be a strange thing for a cat to experience. Like, I wonder what any of that's like for him. I'm sure that's going to depend on exactly how the interactions are structured. And I haven't really thought about the bolt throwing robot that much, but it's going to be an interesting project too. Alright, that is put together with its requisite 15 million screws. I think I've just got to thread this back through the clamps, and then I'm sure I've got to adjust the counterweight still. Let's see if I can get a better angle. Maybe I can at least get Tuke back on here. Oh yeah, driving this without the leash pulling quite so much is actually a lot nicer. The swinging is annoying. I think I need to really dial down the acceleration limit. Anu JN is asking if I'm running Magic Lantern. No, I have not had good experiences with Magic Lantern on this camera. It's eaten too much data, so I don't use it anymore. Oh, I'm sorry, Took. Why is it tracking me now? The cat is right down there. Just tying a knot in the end of the monofilament, trimming that, and I think I'm ready to hoist this up again and see if that was an improvement. So, I just need to place all these objects somewhere where they won't get pulled badly. I think I'm going to put the sandbag on top of my power supply back here. And, oh geez, Tuco, let's move you over here a little bit. Yeah. Now some verticality added back to the system. Oh. Are you already stuck on something? That's going well. Oh. The clamp was getting stuck on the edge of my table. Yeah, this would be easier to do if I had some help. A lot of the steps in installing this flier would be easier with more than one person, but definitely doable with one person. I just have to keep clamping this line down temporarily so I can go over there and make a small adjustment. What is that stuck on? I think the data cable in the back of this is hanging. Oh yeah, that was just one of these extra grommets. I'm gonna slide the grommets down to make them easier to take off later if I want to. Otherwise they'll be hanging up in the air and I won't be able to get to them later. There's actually probably a lot more cable here than I need, which is kind of nice. It means I can move the ceiling anchor later if I need to without worrying about having enough wire to get back to the equipment rack. I think that whole leash is like 100 feet. Alright, back on hoisting. Oh. I need to go back and adjust slightly. We're mostly good, but the counterweight is not quite, the string for the counterweight isn't hanging out where it should. I've just got to put a temporary knot in here. Well, let's lower it that much and then clamp it. Oh, Tuco. Whoa. That was me tripping over the monofilament. That's why it's supposed to be in the air and not on the floor. It's pretty much invisible. Okay. Let's do less of that. This is what I was trying to do. I just needed very carefully to get the monofilament to be in the little channel in the upside down horseshoe shape thing. What should I call that? That purple thing. It's like designed to be a place to kind of help the wire find a nice turning radius, but it's also acting as a channel for the monofilament right now. And very soon we might start to get some air on the counterweight. I need to adjust it again. Not the same way, just in a different way. Oh, we were really close to being able to levitate that counterweight. Okay. It's interesting how dynamic this system is. Like, you make a little kind of jerky move on the leash and then you hear the winches kind of chirp a little bit in response. I think this is going well so far, but I'm noticing that I just want the monofilament to be way shorter. So I'm going to lower it a little bit so I can still get to it enough to shorten it, but then, yeah, let's do that. Actually, I think more than just being able to get to it, I'm going to lower this enough that I actually let the tension out. And actually, now that I can get to the... I was thinking about taking out the end with the, or the knot at the end with the sandbag, but actually this end is even easier. So I'm just going to take the knot out on the clamp end and remove, oh geez, quite a lot of this, but how much? Maybe too much. I think that's where this is going. I'm going to remove too much, aren't I? I'm going to start by taking like a meter. I'm just tying another knot somewhat farther down, and then I'm going to trim this and then hoist it again. So can we actually see the leash from here? So that's what we've got so far. Got a few of these healthy little loops dangling down. I'm gonna add some more upness to that cable and see how far we get on this strategy. In the meantime, I'm just gonna point this at Tuco. The winches are squeaking. I think I want that counterweight to be lighter. I think I'm going to tie this off right here. It's still got a ways to go before it's actually at the ceiling, but I think this is a good level to start messing with the counterweight at, maybe. That's not how you tie that knot. Okay. It is tied down with a slip knot and a clamp. Oh yeah. Yeah, actually I think with a little bit of adjustment to the weight in the sandbag, we could be onto something. I need something to pour sand out into. I have plenty of buckets in the shop. Man, it's super weird hearing all the winches chirp in response to just me handling this sandbag. So even though this is not all the way up, this is actually looking pretty good. I need to show you what the leash looks like right now. This is more like what I'd imagined. So we have a section kind of cutting straight over to the flier. Then we have a bundle with extra cord for a few loops. And then we have the ceiling mount. So that needs to get higher, and this needs to get lighter. The camera is tracking my butt instead of Tuco. That's not what it's supposed to do. Ooh, yeah, these are the fancy sandbags with double zippers. Dusty. Yeah, I'm pretty into these pants. I have trouble with stuff that's like too complicated when I'm just trying to get work done. I've got some nice complicated pants that I like too, but I've also just been less into that since I've been less interested in like complicated fashion and like trying to look cool lately and all that. Here I am tugging on this like there's no camera attached to it. Oh, that is much closer to neutral, which is cool. Ed's wondering about software image stabilization. Yeah, we could try something like that. That's less effective, I imagine, when you're starting out with an image that's only 1080p. Like if we were sending something higher res, then maybe I would expect to get something a little more useful out of stabilized footage. I mean, we could just like try it in After Effects easy enough and see how it looks. That is feeling pretty nice. I don't really see any reason to re-zip these except to avoid nasty surprises for future me. Which seems like a decent enough reason, so I might as well do that. And I'm curious how heavy this is, so I'm going to weigh this with a luggage scale. I don't know how accurate the luggage scale is going to be at the low end, but let's try it out. The luggage scale says this is only like 150 grams. I don't know if I believe that. I mean, it's just barely enough to keep the leash out of the way, really, which is what I want. I mean, I don't know if it's even quite enough, but I guess we'll find out. When I lower it, when I unlower this the rest of the way by raising it. Nope. This is not pants cam o'clock. It's, wow, gimbal. Yeah, I really flung that over. Oh yeah, not great for static. Yeah, some pants, I've certainly got some pants that are comfortable, but not very good for static. The anti-static mat is pretty good. I recommend those. Alright, now some lifting. If only I had a robot that could lift things. Okay, being slow and deliberate about this, but I should be able to get it pretty much all the way up. Ooh. I might actually run out of how much space I have in the monofilament. Let's go a little higher, but the counterweight is actually, it looks like only a meter or so from the bottom of the purple thing. This might be good enough though, let's find out. Okay, that is kind of temporarily tied down. How are we doing? It's like close. I think we might be okay. It's really hard to see from that angle, but let's just try flying this around a bit. Maybe an overhead view? Okay, so the flyer's up there. So how far can we back up? That's promising. I'm trying to hit Z- and X+ at the same time to get over and down. And I'm meeting some resistance around here, but it's way better than it was, and probably good enough. It's a little bouncy. I'm gonna let it settle out a bit. Yeah. Oh, Julia says they like my voice. I'm glad that works out for you. Yeah, it's like a weird thing, voices, but yeah. So other than the wiggling there, which is probably due to a bunch of reasons that we can diagnose in the near future, I think that's pretty good. Let's try to. I'm gonna see if actually how far I can get into that corner out of curiosity. The wiggling here is mostly me fighting against all the limits in the algorithm. Whoa. Yeah, it's getting hard to navigate in that corner. Alright, well maybe now that I'm a little bit more mobile, maybe, I wonder if Tuco would be interested in playing, like in the open area, or if he just wants to hang out and sleep now. It's possible that if I go over there, he'll join me. Can I put this camera somewhere less obtrusive? I don't know. Let's put it up there. But if you want that full screen, there's a feed of that right now at twitch.tv/TucoFlyer. You can see I keep moving around my desk. That little black box is supposed to just be so when I type passwords on that keyboard, they don't end up on the DVR, but like when I stream, I tend to move stuff around. Hey, Tuke. You want to hang out over here, buddy? So we can test the mobility. I'm going to sit down over here and start flying it around. Well, maybe I'll wake up this iPad so I can get chat again. Oh, hey Fuzz. Oh, bot status overlay proposal. What is this like? I'm opening this link up, and while I let this load, I'll see if I can get the bot back over here. I'm like aiming to put it pretty much right where we are. I think instinctively I was interested in testing that X plus Y plus corner. Oh, and now it's shaking so much. Man, the leash counterweight thing is not good for shaking. Oh! Yeah, I'm running out of slack on my leash monofilament actually, so I can't quite get into that corner. But I think I can go over here by my desk maybe. Oh gosh, watching that counterweight drop is a little bit nerve-wracking. Oh gosh. Yeah, I think a lot of that swaying right now is coming from the leash counterweight system. Can I go? Still having trouble getting it over here. I just don't quite have enough monofilament now. Erg. I think the wire might be long enough. The rest of this, not quite. Oh, looking at the image that loaded, so I don't actually have that much information currently, but that's an interesting idea. So that's like a full screen overlay that shows up over everything and then shows the position of the flyer and then the winch forces. So right now I don't have an absolute positioning system. The position of the flyer would have to be an estimate, and I plan on having that estimate, but it's not going to be a very good estimate, and it'll be very, very jittery. And so I don't think it'll be useful to have that displayed so prominently. I think it would just be noisy. I think having it in some form would be good, but I don't know if making it that big would be what I want. The forces, like something like that might be nice. I definitely want to display the forces. I think I might want to display the forces as a little graph. Between the leash running out of space and the furniture, it's kind of hard to get in there, huh? That'd be a great spot for the camera if it wasn't for the leash running out of space. So I should fix that. I think it just needs more monofilament now. I should not have trimmed off that last meter. And yeah, it's quite possible that I end up needing to to use like a compound pulley or something to give myself more room. Do I have the parts to do that right now? I'd probably have to print more of those pulleys. Actually, I have these little, like, clothes line pulleys that might actually work alright for that. I could print more pulleys, I just don't have them right now, so if I can prototype it with something I already have, that would be nice. Oh, is the overhead cam off again? Sorry. No, it's not me bumping something, it's a software problem. I don't know where it's losing the feed, but it's just not, it's like losing the connection for some reason. I think this is the part of the stream where, like, the problem solving is interesting, but I'm a bit socially exhausted already. That blind spot is in the least convenient position right now. Of course, when I move it, it's again going to be in the least convenient position. Where's Tuco? Whoop. I keep getting Z plus and Z minus confusion. It's like, nope, up, down. I'm gonna just bump this into something now. Okay, you can kind of see that. Oh, Mako MK says, I'm imagining a circle in the corner with segments that turn red when the force limits are hit and that rotates to match the image orientation. That could be interesting, yeah. Yeah, I mean, maybe we wait and plan out the overlay a bit more once I have a better sense for how reliable the position and orientation estimates are. The orientation comes from a couple of places. There's an IMU in the Flier, and then there's also sensors in the gimbal. And we can combine those together to get a probably a pretty good orientation estimate for the camera itself relative to the robot body. But then we've got to add in, like, well, where is that in the room using the force sensors? And that, I think, is going to be quite noisy. This is definitely an improvement over the camera that I have to carry across the room, along with a big pole and a bunch of sandbags. It's also kind of a funny feeling that when I was driving this without the gimbal attached to it, it was kind of activating the part of my brain that's like a little bit used to flying like RC helicopter kind of things. And I would look at the robot and just imagine what its coordinate system is and then just try to drive it in that coordinate system. But now it's really tempting to look at the video feed and try to drive it according to the video feed. And of course, the camera and this coordinate system have no relation to each other right now. So that's definitely going to be one of the next things to do software-wise. Did Tuco knock over my tea, or did I knock it over? Because there's definitely a spilled cup of tea over here. The iPad is not very wet, which is good. Well, I think the next step here is definitely to add more monofilament, which by that I mean replace the current one with one that's a little bit longer. It'd be nice to know how much length I have to work with. So could we move this to the other extreme, where the counterweight is all the way down? I should actually clean up this puddle of tea on the rug, very slightly at least. Take that, puddle of tea. Where is Tuco? He is right behind the coffee table. Wow. That is very tilty. Whoa. What can we see? Whole lot of winch chirping. That isn't quite where I was interested in going, but that's an interesting place to be. It can... Oh... It is very tilted. How much of that can you see on the overhead cam? That's really just the weight of the leash, and it's that far over. Like, that's specifically the weight of the part of the leash that's hanging in the air. Like, I can't offset that just with the counterweight. The angle is weird, but it's not necessarily a problem, and I was expecting there to be some tilt on this. Seems like it's already settled down and such that the image looks fine. Ah, this is a good angle too. Can I get a better angle? I mean, I can just nudge that so I'm on screen a little bit, but... Let's see. Anyway, I should fly over to the left side and up as much as I care to, because that's where the counterweight will be at the lowest position. You can see the fire extinguisher. Those are always useful. Oh, I probably have a good view of the winches from here. One of those winches is not quite hitting its dead zone. I think that's winch 0. If I just toggle halt and then go back to manual, it should fix that. But that is something to tweak in the parameters. Man, it is actually pretty easy to get the camera into a pretty awesome vantage point with the system. It would maybe also be nice to rig this so that it knows if there are maybe secondary objects of interest in the screen, and to try to keep those centered also, or in view. So right now, like, it knows about Tuco. It knows to keep Tuco in view, and so it's framing Tuco kind of such that he doesn't exit around like a third of the, like the third, most extreme third of the screen, so he stays kind of in the middle, but not exactly in the middle, which I thought would help with image framing. Which is fine if you're just looking at Tuco, but because Tuco and I are interacting here, it can recognize me, like it's drawing a box around me, but the software just doesn't know yet to try to keep me in the image. And so that's something else where we can use the object detector to try to get better photography by adjusting the frame to include Tuco and I both. So that's something to add to the to-do list. For now, I can just use the joystick to aim the frame over here, and then at some point it'll, yeah, there it goes. It notices Tuco. Winch 1 is buzzing into unslack mode. Definitely needs more dead zone. Anyway, the counterweight is still, like, I've got maybe another meter there. Can I go any further up? I am pretty close to being literally as close as I'd ever want the flier to be to the leash anchor. I've got the flier parked pretty much right under the leash, and I know it's swinging a bunch, but I know I keep saying that, like, we can fix the swinging for the most part. Like, there are some intrinsic mechanical things that make it likely to swing, but I think a lot of the swinging right now is just being exacerbated by software glitches that are causing it to just oscillate a lot. especially around the low end. So I think we can improve that. Oh man. I wonder if I could just tie an extra length of monofilament instead of redoing the whole thing. I mean, the knot has to make it through that first pulley, but that first pulley is pretty generously sized, so I think it'd be fine. Unfortunately, I can't actually get the sandbag any closer to Earth than it is right now without lowering the mounting point, so I think I've got to do that next. So I think what I'm going to do is lower the mounting point and either extend this monofilament or just replace it. I haven't quite decided yet. I might just replace it because it's pretty easy to. I'm lowering this thing anyway. So I might replace the monofilament and then leave it long and then size it by parking the flyer just where it was so that it's as close as possible. And then right there, just put the sandbag as low as I care to have it and then see how far that gets me. If that doesn't give me enough range of motion, then I've got to think about compound pulleys or using springs instead of a counterweight. Anyway, I could take this down and make that change, but I'm also just having fun like actually using it right now. Let's see if I can get this into a better position. Oh, this is actually great. Right here, this is what the project is actually for. Oh, the overhead cam disconnected again. Let me just give you this full screen. Sorry. Be right back, Took. So you can get the all the debug overlays and stuff if you go to twitch.tv/TucoFlyer, but this is just going to be the raw camera feed for a bit. Yeah. Oh yeah, it was like a little bit more intimate from this angle. I wonder if you can get over here. I think we're gonna hit the problem with the leash not being long enough if I try to get any closer. That is as low as I can get before lengthening that cable. Love you, Duco. What? It just got interested in me for some reason. Yeah, I really like it when the tracking works well. That makes me happy. And And so there are a couple of other milestones in the near future that we should be able to get to where, so like right now, obviously the tracking is only moving the gimbal, but I'd like to have the tracking also be able to move the robot. There are some prerequisites, like I'd like the collision avoidance to be working before we get to that point, at least before we start doing too much with it. But yeah, for example, when Tuco's taking up most of the frame, it could know to back up, and it would know which direction backing up is and how to convert that into the right coordinate system. So yeah, so I think the next thing to do is just to work out bugs in this leash system, which we're getting closer to. And then I think the next thing after that is probably to work on accurately, or at least like pretty accurately determining how high the flyer is above the ground. So we're going to be using 3 of these laser distance sensors, these LiDAR rangefinders, combined with the IMU. And so figuring out what angle the flyer's at, based on the angle the IMU or the lasers are firing off at and what distance they're reading, how far away would the ground be, and then combining the multiple laser sensors so that we can deal with some amount of occlusion. It wants to keep all of Tuco kind of centered. She says, ascribing agency to the computer program she wrote. Tuco just so doesn't care about this thing right now. He is interested in, oh, did you finally, he likes these feather toys. He finally, I think, bit off all the feather from this one. So, Tuco, I think it's time to get you a replacement feather doodad for this. I think I've even got one in the cat toy cabinet. Just need to put that fresh one on here. What do you want to play with in the meantime, Tuc? Do you like this thing still? This is like one of your oldest cat toys. This one came with the supplies that I got from your previous cat caretaker. Do you not care? Do you still like this other one, Tuc? Oh, how about these two? That thing happened again where I hit the dead man switch safety button to move the gimbal, or sorry, yeah, to move the gimbal, and the winches start moving also because this joystick was not zeroed. Hey, Tuc. Ow. Yeah, I think he still likes this toy. It's gotten very destroyed by now, but I think he's still into it. Let's see if I can still clip it onto this thing. Hey, Tuc. Alright, destroyed mouse. Can we get around that coffee table? How about the other direction? That would work if we could aim the gimbal more steeply. That's close enough. There are a lot of things that we might be able to do to mitigate this wobble. Like, it's certainly something that's like annoying and bothering me, but also that I think we can fix to a large extent with software. Partly by just not causing it in the first place, by avoiding the sharp movements that cause it, and then partly by, there might even be some active strategies we can do to mitigate it, like, we probably don't have a fast enough response with the winches to, like, move out of phase with it to stop it, but we could try that maybe. I don't think we can quite, I don't know. I mean, we can change the motor speed quite quickly. It's just right now we usually don't, because there's an acceleration limit in place which tries to just move everything really slowly so that we don't cause wobble. But if we're specifically trying to counteract the wobble, then it's possible we might actually be able to do that at 250 Hertz, given how slow the wobbles are. But I'm not really counting on that working. I think more realistically, I want to try to reduce it by just not causing it in the first place. Catching up on chat. Sorry, I'm a little behind on this one. Where was I? Ed asks, do the winches have an estimate of how much cord was spooled out? Could also be a way of estimating position. Yeah, they do, but it's not that good, and errors accumulate over time in a way that I don't really know how to compensate for. So I'd rather not use that. I use the position sensing for just kind of like short-term control loop purposes, but I don't really want to rely on it for anything longer than that, because errors are going to add up, and I don't have a way of compensating for that. James says, surely now you'll have another thing to blame when something's knocked over. The winches did it. It's all a conspiracy. I mean, I've certainly knocked things over with the winches driving it myself, but like, I'm not going to give the winches any kind of autonomy. They're still, I'm still driving them around. When I do let folks drive it around over the internet, that'll be after I've got some amount of collision avoidance working, and hopefully working pretty well. Oh, that's a good question. Vevasaur asks, does the whole flyer make much noise when not moving? Very little. You can hear a little bit of noise from the gimbal if you listen really closely, like if your head's right next to it, but it's very quiet. And if the winches are on at all, then, like, when the winches are moving slowly, they make a lot more noise than when they're moving quickly, because that's how the PWM is set up currently. So if the winches are like kind of sort of moving, then that's actually pretty noisy. So I try to keep that from happening. Whereas the motors in the gimbal are always on to some extent, but the PWM in the gimbal is really quiet. Oh yeah, Vavasaur is wondering just how annoying the whole contraption is overall to have in your space. That's been a large thing that I've been trying to mitigate. Like, overall, I don't want this thing to be annoying, which is a lot of why I spent so long designing the winches to be enclosed and have force sensors and all that. And I think to some extent that was successful. I have this design in mind for like a next generation winch that I think would be a lot better, but I think the current winches are still like plenty good enough, and I'm not going to be frustrated having them in my space, I think. Maybe I want to back up with the camera a little bit. Backing up kind of works, except he's going to be right behind the coffee table. Oh, was that your cue to move, Tuco? Yeah, right now the winches kind of make this vuvuzela kind of noise when they're slowing down. They're sort of like this kind of like sci-fi robot car when they're speeding up, and then like this honking monster when they're slowing down, just because of how the control loop is currently set up. We totally could get into more of like a control loop tuning stream. I I might do that later. This stream is turning out to be more of just like a physically playing with it and messing with the leash setup kind of stream. But I've been doing some control loop tuning, more of that yesterday than today, but a lot of that is hinged on having the data that we've got in InfluxDB, so that'll be a nice thing to investigate for sure. I've been poking at the dashboard there, and we've got more data to look at, which is always nice. Did Tuco just bump the controller? That's funny. I think Tuco just hit the shoulder switch and the controller moved the winch very slightly. Stalking his prey. You know, the usual cat stuff. Oh yeah, sorry, I keep getting behind on the chat. There's so many good suggestions here, and I'm just like playing with the cat or something. Vavasaur, this seems very low. Do you mean the stream quality or like how high the camera was? I think I'm missing the context there. Fabio says next to maybe autofocus and motorized zoom. Isn't that maybe asking a lot? I'm not planning on doing motorized zoom for this camera or autofocus. I know that those are things that some cameras have. They are things that this camera doesn't, and that's like not a mistake. That's just a choice that I made. Fabio also suggests ultrasonically pinging the ceiling and subtracting it to the room height to get the distance to the ground. That would work if this room was more square, but it isn't. I thought about measuring the ceiling, but I figured the floor would be flatter than the ceiling despite all the stuff on it. Scanebble? I don't know how to say your nick, sorry. They're wondering if optical mouse sensors could track the string length moving past them accurately and maybe recalibrate on marks every foot or so. That's an interesting idea. Right now I use a physical wheel, a capstan wheel that spins up against the cord and turns into an optical encoder, which I would expect to be more accurate than optical mouse sensors, but the periodic recalibration marks are an interesting idea. The marks would change though because the string also stretches over time. I just generally don't, like, I didn't really design this system to expect the strings to be an accurate way of measuring distance. The strings are more like variable shock absorbers. So like the whole strategy is different. Like I don't want the strings to be rigid in this system. I want the strings to be a little bit squishy. Like if the strings were perfectly rigid, I couldn't do the force balancing algorithm the way it is right now, and a lot of other things would be twitchier. Oh, this toy is stuck in this chair over here, and Tuco's intrigued. Oh, and yeah, the question about the PWM. Yeah, that was a friction mitigation strategy, one of a few. And it's still a work in progress. I'm sure the winches will keep changing sounds, but the way it's set up right now, we start at a low frequency PWM, which is I think around 300 hertz, and then exponentially ramp it up once we detect that the winches are moving. And so it's basically a low pass filter that operates on the period of the PWM waveform. But that's all implemented on the Rust side. It's easy to change that. The firmware just takes the PWM in every motor control packet, the PWM frequency, and it can adjust that dynamically. Oh, I see. Yeah, Vavasor, when it was very low, they were saying that I was petting Tuco and the leash was almost all the way extended. Yeah, I was looking up there, and the counterweight was pretty much hitting the pulley. So now that Tuco's on the coffee table, I should actually be able to get a much wider range of angles here. This is one of those cases where this angle is alright. There's a camera angle which would actually be better, that would require going past the, what do you want to call that? The discontinuity in the gimbal? The point I can't rotate past. So I'd have to rotate the gimbal all the way around the other end. And so if you think about that, like making that rotation with the gimbal and then making the corresponding movement with the flier so that it can keep looking at Tuco, that would involve it kind of rotating like behind, I guess behind where I'm sitting right now, which doesn't really help you, but like toward the bottom end of what was on the overhead camera, which is where I'm having trouble going right now because the leash is too short. I could also certainly try to suspend the leash from somewhere more central now that I'm noticing how it affects the forces on the robot more. It's not really easy to get an anchor point of any sort onto the right side of the room here, but the kind of bottom side, like near where the camera itself was mounted, the overhead camera, like I can get anchor points up there. Okay, now Tuco is behind me. How do I get this on camera? Like that? That was straightforward. I mean, we are dangerously close to the discontinuity. I should probably just mount the flier so the discontinuity is elsewhere. We're hitting it an awful lot. Like maybe if it was toward X+, I would hit it less. That is actually really easy to do. I just have to retie 4 knots. It is hard to get over toward X+ without also staying pretty high off the ground, unfortunately. At this height, this is about as far over toward X+ I can get it with the current length of the counterweight. James asks, have I got data on InfluxDB for all the winch sensors that you aren't using yet? Which sensors are those? You mean the flier sensors? I've got a bunch of the sensors in there. I haven't just dumped like the entire packet into InfluxDB, but maybe I should. James says, would it be useful to change the control so that it knows to go around the long way when you try to move across the discontinuity? Think that through. How would you actually do that? You know, maybe this is what I need to do. Like, I find it frustrating when I have a stream of suggestions that don't make sense, which the part of the core of the like difference between like I guess what I'm getting at is, like, you know, if you ask something you don't necessarily know if it's going to work, which is usually why you ask it. But I guess maybe what I want to do is maybe challenge people to think things through a little bit and think about the implications. So maybe we can do some of that together. Like, well, so if you just wanted the discontinuity to just kind of magically disappear, well, what would the options be? If you were going to try to resolve it at the level of controlling the gimbal, well, like where would you be putting this in the block diagram? You have, and maybe this is when I just need like a whiteboard with a block diagram on it. Because I've got a mental model of all the blocks in the system, and there is not an obvious place to put something like that. And my mental model of the system is that it isn't even the right approach. And so I'd like to be able to explain that, but yeah, where's the right place to start there? James thought I was using the force sensor, but no, we're measuring position. Why wouldn't I be using that? No, the whole PID loop is based on feedback from the encoder. What I was saying earlier about the length of the cord is that I don't want to rely on it in the long term. So I don't want to be making any, like we were talking about this in the context of a position estimator that tries to figure out where we are in the room based on how much cord has been spooled out. But there are a bunch of things that are going to give us errors that accumulate. Any amount of slip in the cord, any time in which the winches move and we're not saving that data. So like if we restart one of the software components, for example, like physically the capstan and the cord slipping against each other, the cord stretching. I don't know. It's not something I want to rely on to be accurate. But the reason we have the sensor is that it's immensely more reliable in the short term than looking at just like what voltage are we sending the motor. So it's the main way that we get speed feedback. And the reason we talk about it as position a lot is that it's I tried having the control loop be primarily based on velocity instead of position, and it was like integrating noise. I mean, it was not what was the actual problem that I ran into? It was, I think you could probably get either approach to work, but I was just finding that trying to base the control loop off of velocity, I was having to do a lot more to mitigate the noise because I was working with like the derivative of the actual measurement I'm taking rather than the actual measurement. And it turns out that at the single winch level, I actually do get more out of thinking about them as having a position target that they're trying to reach, because that allows all the winches to work together at the same speed really, really accurately, or like more accurately than I would otherwise. So that's why I do actually like to think about that in terms of position, but the positions are all these like kind of fake numbers that can just wrap around, and like they don't represent an actual length of cord in meters. They represent this quantity that's just used like as an integrator, like for keeping track of where the cord is from tick to tick in the control loop. Yeah, stretch, temperature, humidity, magic pixie interference. Yeah, basically. Oh, another question I missed. Tyler's asking what the plan is for collision avoidance. Whiskers on the flyer or computer vision? We might have to do something with computer vision, but the main plan is infrared sensors, which are kind of like whiskers. We've got a ring of infrared sensors pointing down from the top of the flier on this part that I've been calling the sensor saucer. And the idea is for those to surround the camera and give us early warning if something might bump into it. They need some work. Right now they're fixed in place and I really need to make them aimable. So one of the future projects is to make these little 3D printed adapters that I can slip in between the sensor and their mount to let me aim them right now. Well, yeah, I don't know about the counterweight, man. The counterweight, it's not quite all the way at the ceiling right now, but it's like maybe getting high enough that it's encountering some resistance. I mean, I think the next step is still the thing I was talking about, like just lengthening the cord, but I'm just looking at it thinking like, oh, is there something else to do? It's okay, but it's not amazing. The leash continues to be one of my least favorite parts of this design. And as annoying as this might be, it could actually be worth trying to make the leash lighter. We could switch to lighter gauge Cat 5 wire maybe, and then also use power over Ethernet. Those two together don't seem like a great combination, do they? I mean, right now I'm using somewhat heavy network cable and I'm using a separate power cable, so there's a lot of room for improvement. I wasn't sure how much the weight of the leash would matter, since I've got the counterweight, and theoretically the counterweight can you know, relieve the flier from the weight of the leash and then some. And the flier actually has to pull down somewhat to get the leash to unspool. And that's fine, it's just that it ends up putting... I guess I just wasn't quite prepared for how sensitive the flier was going to be to very small force vectors. You know, stuff in the neighborhood of like 100 grams actually makes a big difference here. Okay, so James is expounding on their suggestion a little bit. So the controller changes the desired angle of the gimbal, which you then feed into the gimbal itself. That's not actually how that works. Allow the value to go all the way continuous, mod it by 360 degrees, clamp it a little bit because the discontinuity isn't actually zero width, and feed that to the gimbal. Okay, so when you try to move it past the right end, it'll just like swing around. I don't see how that behavior is desirable. Because like chattering back and forth across that discontinuity is... I can't think of any reason why that would actually be what you want. I would much rather move the flier around. Like if you imagine, like, let's say Tuco's here, and then the flier is right here, and let's say the discontinuity is like my index finger. Or no, let's make that more physically based. So let's say let's just say I can only turn my arm this amount, and so like I can look at Tuco from there, I can look at Tuco from here, but if I want to turn any further, then there's this gap between my thumb and my pinky where I can't actually see Tuco. The gap is nowhere near 0 width. It's actually pretty significant. It's maybe like 10 degrees or 15 degrees. And so I can turn like that. So I guess what I'm saying is, well, I could say, well, let's say I'm controlling the camera to turn around this way, and then, James's suggestion is I get here, I should just pretend I actually want to be here, and then just really quickly tell the gimbal to go there. But I think what I'd rather do is like, well, if I'm turning this direction and I actually want, I'm actually kind of losing Tuco off that side, I think what instead I want to do is move around in this direction so that I can then see him from the other side of the range without actually having to make any unnecessary movements, really, and without like losing tracking completely for some period of time. And so I think there are a lot of reasons why this strategy wouldn't be what I want. One is that you are, like, it becomes very modal. Like, during that operation of I need to swing around, you can't maintain tracking. You have to just say, well, I'm going to do this and then get right back to what I was doing. And so that's where you're going to lose tracking. Because you're not going to be seeing, you're not going to get any input during that period that's useful. And then we aren't just giving, it isn't like controlling the gimbal isn't as simple as just like telling it what angle to be at. We could, like that is like one component of how the gimbal works, but, and like I could, like we could go deeper into talking about how the gimbal control loops work, but there are like several stacked control loops happening. The level at which we're communicating with the gimbal microcontroller, if that's useful to think about, is that it gives us sensor readings, which include angles from all the joints in the gimbal. And then we give it rates, which are roughly angular velocities that it should be trying to hit from each of the axes. But we're not just telling it like where to be, we're telling it kind of how fast to move, sort of. And so I guess what you're hitting is like continuous design versus like state machines. Like we could make this all about state machines and like, well, it's doing this thing, now it's doing this kind of a thing, now it's doing that kind of a thing. And maybe we need to add that at some point, but I think it's best to figure out how much of that functionality you can get out of more of a continuous system without having to think about it in terms of different states first. Does that make sense? I hope I'm not rambling too much. Let's see if I can get get the camera any further over into that corner. We are running out of leash. Oh, and the gimbal is buzzy. Yeah. How hard do I have to pull this to get it over into this corner? Because another thing we haven't really played with on stream yet is adding weight to the flier. So I'm just pulling it down. That's doing all right, but it's kind of hard to keep this consistent. I'm gradually letting go of it. And it really just wants to be over there. Well, yeah, the cat is pretty great. He is such a good friend. Yeah, no, thanks for going into it with me, James. I think that's probably a better strategy than just like getting frustrated at comments that are kind of like different than my understanding of how the system has to work. It's definitely better to explore that than to just like get annoyed. So I'll try to do my part of that too. It is really frustrating not being able to get this camera any further towards X plus than this, really. I mean, it's understandable. The counterweight is way up there. I think one thing that's maybe been missing from the stream is like a mobile camera where you can get a better view of this from like my perspective. I'm feeling like maybe it would be good to wrap things up semi-soon because I'm maybe running out of things to share and running out of, I don't know, just like, I feel like I need to just like sit down and debug this for a bit, which is a little hard to do right at the moment on stream, but let's at least do some like iPad streaming. So I usually set this up with screen mirroring on the iPad and then just share that to get a mobile camera. The gimbal is slightly buzzy right now, speaking of noise. It's not supposed to do that. That's just because it's a little unstable at the moment, which is one of the problems for our to-do list. Oh yeah, sorry, I've been away from the YouTube chat because it's over on this side of the room, but let me just catch up on that too. Sorry. Oh, rabbit holes, yeah. I think that was a bit earlier, but yeah, just a discussion about projects kind of being complicated and being like a big rabbit hole of complexity, and that's totally true. But I think you can get into that with a lot of different areas of, you know, engineering and integration, but that's part of what I like. I tend to enjoy things where, you know, the journey involves integrating a lot of stuff together, and then the result is, you know, something fun. Matthew suggests using barometers to measure height, using a fixed barometer to calibrate day-to-day changes in pressure. That's an interesting idea. I don't know if that would be responsive enough to give me the kind of like millisecond to millisecond kind of height mapping that I'm looking for, but oh, that's an interesting idea. And then suddenly Corporeal asks, is the flyer going to be doing any sort of mapping or pathfinding? That's a good question. I think so far my strategy has been to give it a pretty wide open area to be in. So when it's navigating automatically, I'd like it to be in an area where there just isn't really anything for it to bump into, if possible. Or at least if there is anything for it to bump into, that those are like pretty easy to locate using the IR sensors. But yeah, as for like automatically avoiding the obstacles, that's a pretty high level kind of bit of functionality, and it'd be nice to include it eventually, but for that to work, it also needs to know like, well, where is it? Because it doesn't really have absolute positioning necessarily. Like the robot does everything in terms of, you know, knowing kind of what its local environment feels like, but not necessarily knowing where it is in the entire room. So we could change that for sure, but it's one of those things where I've been trying not to do that unless it's necessary. There was certainly one thought that it would be cool to include like a depth camera on the flyer so that it can map its environment. We could try to do that with something like the Intel Euclid. It'd be a bit of an overheating hazard to run that thing continuously, but we could try it out. Electric Sushi asks, if Tuco found the opportunity to jump on the gimbal, do you think he would? Can the winch support a cat? Yeah, so far he doesn't seem to be interested in that. If he did jump on it, it would either break or it would start lowering, because he is much heavier than the camera is, and he's above the thresholds at which it would just start to lower the weight automatically. But yeah, he doesn't seem to be interested in that so far, but that is one of the reasons to have force sensors and all that, is so that it's safer around animals. And then James wanted to see a shot of the top of the flyer. Yeah, we can get to that. I was just going to switch cameras too while I'm over here. What do I want this footage for? I mean, I have to have some maybe leash footage. Me with my photographer hat with no good angles. Maybe that'll do. Okay. How's that set of angles? So yeah, that's the counterweight pretty much entirely at the ceiling. Super backlit, sorry. Oh, sorry. I just sent it up a little faster than I meant to and had to hit halt. So here, you can maybe see that the sandbag isn't quite all the way to the ceiling, but I am actually still having trouble getting the robot any further toward the kind of bottom right of the screen than this point. And I think that's just because Winch 0, so the one kind of next to the fan on the iPad screen. So that one, I think, is just hitting its lower force limit because that leash is kind of taking so much of the force that it actually needs. So I might need the counterweight to still be lighter, just like a little bit lighter. A little bit lighter and a little bit longer string. Something like that. So much of that bouncing comes from while it's slowing down. Like, as I've mentioned, that's like one of the problem areas right now. So that's what it looks like right now. The idea behind this top mounting is that paracords, which could even be the same paracord that goes all the way up to the winch. In this case, I'm using a slightly different piece just so that it's easy to take it off and put it back on, and so you can see the two pieces are tied together. But there's a little length of paracord which goes through this channel in the 3D printed, that blue piece, which is kind of a structural piece. It goes through these channels and then out the middle where it knots. And then the leash goes through the very middle. And so this red piece is the clamp that holds the leash onto this, these two carbon fiber rods. I've still got that LED problem. I need to fix that. Let's see. All right. Well, I think this might be about the right spot to wrap up this stream. I could use a little bit more just like alone time to fidget with the parameters and to adjust the leash, but I had to show this bit of progress because it's flying, right? That's great, right? I'm pretty happy with this. James likes the way the heatsink on the gimbal catches the light. Cool. I'm glad that worked out. Mako MK says the leash design is clever and kind of like a 1D version of a Roman blind. Oh yeah, you're right. You're right. It is kind of like that. Like you pull the cord and it lifts the blinds up. And what was that? Was that my hair? That was my hair. Yeah, next time you see this, I might have rotated it around so that the blind spot is toward X+, because the Y+ blind spot, it turns out, I put it there because I was thinking, oh, like that kitchen area, you don't need to see that, right? But it turns out it also makes it really hard to see that rug where Tuco and I like to hang out, so there's that. We'll have to see which orientation makes the most sense. And yeah, the leash isn't perfect, but it's, I think that was one of those areas that I was really worried about because I hadn't really been able to simulate it that much. I hadn't really been able to do anything like this before, so it felt like kind of a risky-ish part of the design. And there are certainly some things we could do to change it around if this one doesn't end up working to our satisfaction. It's come up a couple of times that we could certainly have a 5th winch that's just for cable management, but I'm going to try the simpler solution first. And so thanks everybody for stopping by. It's always a pleasure to hang out in the virtual hackerspace with all of you, and it's really great to just, keep trying to share what I do here and to try to, to make it a good place to work on stuff together and to learn about how to build things and take them apart and just make the world around you a little bit, nicer in whatever way matters to you. So yeah, that's what I'm trying to do here, and appreciate you for helping out. And a big thanks to everyone who supports the channel by sending in hardware, by telling your friends about the show, by sending some money my way for cat food and rent on Patreon. That's what keeps this going, and I am super grateful to have recently hit like 400 supporters on Patreon, so there are a lot of you out there helping keep this show going and keeping the edited videos coming out at scanlime.org when I get to a milestone, and it does seem like we're pretty close to one of those milestones, so I'm going to be busy with video editing soon, and that's going to be exciting too. Thanks for stopping by. Catch you next time. Happy hacking, folks.